Caroline, thank you for Blaze Sports. It's fun to jump in and share a little bit of our knowledge so we can share it to others. Okay, so let's dive in to the fun part of the whole thing. I'm gonna start with the different kinds of racing chairs. Um, okay, but before I start with the names of all the different kind of chairs, I want you to know that the reason for different kind of frames and shapes and so on. If you think of me, Caroline said I'm an amputee. I'm a bilateral above knee amputee. Daniel is a spina bifida, and then you get someone with one leg, someone with two legs below knee amputee. So we all, and then you get paras with some of them very, very tiny little legs again. So we all are different. We all look a little bit different, but we all have to find a way how we can race at our optimal speed and levels. So that's why there's a little bit of different kind of frames in the racing chair world. It's not like cycling where you get one bicycle that all look about the same. So I'm going to start off with a U cage. I'm going to show you share a photo of the. Oops, let me see there. Okay, start presenting. Okay, I hope you can see this. Okay, this is the number one frame mostly used by the top athletes, including Daniel. Um, it's called the U frame or U cage, and there's a reason for that. If you look at the front, by the front of the rear wheels, there's a kind of that U shape coming down, and that is where your knees will rest. Um, it used to be actually long ago they called this the kneeler. So you actually kneel in it, but the official name more likely nowadays is just the U cage. This frame, racing chair frame, is the optimal for efficiency and aerodynamics when it comes to a regular frame built out of aluminum tubing or any kind of tubing. Um, I'm gonna skip to another photo just to show you how people would sit in the chair. Okay, you gotta press stop there. Sit in a chair to give you an idea of where you are with your feet and also where you are with your knees. All right, so there is Vanessa. So now you can see how she sits with her knees. So she is in a kneeling position right there. Her heels are, she's basically sitting on her heels with the buttocks and her knees point forward. So she is in a very locked position. Once you're in that position, that is a very stable position for being in a racing chair. It does look very uncomfortable, but it is a very aerodynamic flow of air underneath the chair, um, and definitely the number one frame for the elite guys. The second one I'm going to show you is the V cage. Sorry for the flip flop here, but we're getting the job done. So okay, here's the V cage. The V cage is also what it says. The front is in the shape of a V. Well, in the middle of the frame, you'll see there the tubes come up to a V when it connect to the main frame. Um, Now, when I started racing about 30 years ago, this was, the style. Most people used a V frame, um, and the reason why it comes in together in front there, the V, is for the top part of the cage or the seat not to open while you sit in it. So it just brings in stability, so the frame can be you're not pushed out towards the wheels. So let's see how someone would sit in a V frame. I'll give you that. Um, to get in a V frame is a little bit easier. There's an athlete in a V frame. So the reason why he is in a V frame and not in a U cage, ideally he would like to be in a U cage, but he cannot bend his knees a full 90 degrees at that point in his career. Now he can, but see how big his legs. He's got big legs. He's got a lot of muscle in his legs, so it's not possible for him to sit in that kneeling position. So his feet is on a foot plate. It's not as effective position as the U cage, but still great. Most of the young athletes, this is the style where they're going to start in. Yeah, I think this is about it. So let's hop over to Daniel to take it on for us. What do you have there, Daniel?
Oh, you're muted, Daniel. It's okay.
Tech support, sorry.
Yeah. You're good.
Are we good? Okay. So I know you're all excited to get into the racing chair, but before we do, there are a few things that we need to go over. And the first thing is helmets. So before you even transfer into a chair, you should be wearing the helmet. The first thing about a helmet is make sure that it is properly sized for your head. And then also make sure that it is level on your head. I see a lot of helmets that are up like this, and that doesn't protect your forehead at all. I also see a lot of helmets that are off to the side like this, and that doesn't protect the side of your head. So make sure that it is level side to side and front to back. And with the straps, make sure that the chin strap is nice and tight on your chin and not way down here. And then with the straps on the side, they should meet pretty much right below your ear and be flat, so they shouldn't be twisted at all. And so the second thing about just general safety getting in and out of a chair is that if you have an athlete that is unfamiliar with a setup and is getting into it for kind of the first time, you should have someone kind of hold the front end down because if they don't, when the athlete's getting into the chair, they could actually accidentally lean too far back, and that will send that front wheel doing a full 180, and they will do what is called turtling and basically end up on their back and kind of helpless. So that's no fun for anybody. So yeah, remind them to keep their weight forward as much as they can and have someone just kind of holding the front end down until they get kind of familiar with the center of gravity. The last thing is to make sure that if you have an athlete that is getting into a piece of equipment that they have not used, make sure that they do not use it for an extended period of time, even more than like, say, 15 minutes. Because you want to watch out for things called pressure injuries. And what that is basically a wound that can be caused by prolonged pressure on the skin. And so this is especially important for people with reduced sensation anywhere, as well as bony prominences that are right underneath the skin. So just whenever they get out, just coaches tell your athletes, and athletes remember to do a skin check and look for any skin that might be red or looks irritated in any way. And if there is, you can use some extra padding on that area to try and alleviate the pressure. But I really cannot stress this enough. I could go on and on, but I won't. They're very serious. They've killed people before, so don't mess around with them. And I think after that, I think we're back to you, Krieger, with how to fit someone in a chair.
All right, thanks, Daniel. Okay, so fitting is also, I mean, it's crucial. You have to fit in a chair, um, like a hand would fit in a perfect glove. Um, when you sit in a racing chair, oh, let's get to the right photo there. When you sit in a racing chair and you and it's way too big to you on the sides or way too tight for you, then obviously it's not going to be your thing. So I always say, um, fitting for me, the two things that's common to all of us is the upper frame width, where my hands are now, and the lower frame width, where we will show you in a second, by the hips. Um, the legs can be a different length, or it can be longer or shorter, or whatever the circumstance, or no legs. But as long as the upper frame width and the lower frame width line up with the body, those are the two crucial ones when it comes to fitting. And we know a lot of times we are in program chairs, the chair doesn't really work well for you. So but as a coach or as an athlete, ideally you want the upper part of the frame to be as close as possible to your side. So there where my hands are now, between my fingertips, that would be the width of the upper frame width, or of the upper frame. Then secondly is the lower frame. The lower frame is also very crucial. For someone like me, I don't have a lot of balance, so I need that racing chair to hold tight on my hips. And so I always try to make the lower frame width of my racing chair as narrow as possible. But obviously there is times that you're gonna have program chairs and you just have to work with what you have. Um, you can use, there are ways to get around it. If you have like high density foam, you get a high density foam that's approximately half-inch thick. So say for instance the athlete is a little bit loose on the inside, don't worry too much about the top part of the frame, worry more about the lower part of the frame around the hips, and then add some of the foam to the left side and to the right side to get the athlete a little more stability and a little more like a safety feel in the chair. When you move around, when you move your racing chair and you push it and you feel like your hips are moving, then you're not one with the chair. So ideally, you want to feel like you want to be one with the chair. So when you push, the racing chair is going with you and you're going with the racing chair. There's a couple of other things also that I can just mention. If it's very tippy in front, Daniel talked about getting in it. If you sit straight up in the racing chair and it's very tippy, you can add a little bit foam between, also that high density foam between the back seat and your buttocks. So push you forward a little bit so you don't feel like you want to tip back and fall on your head backwards. Then lastly, I can just mention, if the most of these chairs, the footrest, you can move the footrest either up or down or back or forward. You can also move if someone has shorter legs, you can just move it a little bit up, or someone has longer legs, you can move it down a little bit and forward. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I think that's about it for just a general fit or general feel in the racing chair. Daniel, how's it? So we jump to you again.
Yep. All good. Thank you. There we go. All righty. So diving into some of the equipment in a little bit more detail, starting with the rear wheels, you're going to have basically three primary types of wheels. Most of you will be working with the aluminum rimmed metal spoked wheels. Those work great for beginning racers. But if you have maybe gotten a hand-me-down chair, you also maybe have gotten a pair of carbon fiber quad spokes or four spokes or a pair of disc wheels. And so those are more an elite level wheel. Any of them work just fine. However, the carbon fiber wheels take a little bit of extra care because they're quite fragile, as well as are very expensive. And so if you're ever looking at buying a beginner a pair of wheels, I would go with the aluminum rim metal spoke wheels. And so the wheels also, you can see in the picture, they are kind of angled out at the bottom a little bit. And that angle is called camber. And that basically just increases the stability of the racing chair when we're going around turns so that we don't crash or spill over. So going into the hand rings. Oh, no, not quite yet.
Unshare. Go ahead and unshare. There's an X.
No, that's not it. Where is
Teams is
X?
the
There
go on
was
to
the
team.
X.
There you go. Yeah.
I think I've
There you
stopped
go.
sharing.
Okay.
You're sharing the hand rings,
Oh,
push rims, and
okay.
slide.
There we go.
I think we're
Okay.
good.
Okay. You're good.
So more on the wheels
Technology.
here. Oops. I don't think I meant to do that.
So,
Hold on just a second here.
It's okay. Take your time.
Going into the wheels a little bit more. So I have a pair of carbon fiber disc wheels here. And basically, all the general anatomy is the same for all the wheels. You have a rim that the tire sits in. Then you have whatever the main wheel is made out of. Towards the center, you have a hub. And then in the very center, you have an axle pin. And so that axle pin is basically what actually holds the wheel onto the chair. And so if you ever need to take the wheel off, either to do maintenance or for travel, so there are basically two ways that might happen. The first way is potentially a quick release setup. So there's a button in the center of the wheel that you'd press and then just pull, and the wheel pops right off. And to put it back on, you just press that button again, and it should slide right back on, and it's on. But for most wheels, you're going to need some tools, some Allen keys or hex wrenches. So, that basically will go into the axle pin there. And a little bit of homework for you guys is to figure out what size Allen key you guys need to take off your wheels. And so it's actually pretty important to do it with the correct sized Allen key, because if you try and use one that's just slightly too small, it can actually end up damaging the pin, the axle pin, and that is not good at all. So it actually may help you to also deflate the tire so that it doesn't kind of bump into the rim like I had it bump into the rim there. And so kind of looking at the inside of a wheel here, you can see that you've got the axle pin here, and then I have some spacers. And so I think Krieger will probably go into a little bit more about spacers and their importance. Yeah, going back to the kind of the center here, my axle pin will come out. It's basically just a cylinder of metal with some threads on the end. And but not all axle pins will come out. But if yours does, just make sure that you keep track of it. To put it all back together, just put the pin back through the hub, put your spacers back on. And I actually kind of grab the axle pin so that I kind of have a feeling on where the pin is as compared to the camber tube here that it goes into. And I can tell it's gone in there a little bit, so it can rest there. And then use the Allen key again.
I have no idea what's happened.
Oh, okay.
Hold on, are we still on?
It's just your screen is off, it looks like.
Okay, let me find Teams again. I think in moving, I managed to
No worries.
change something. There we go.
Okay, you're back.
So again, just use that Allen key to put the pin back on, and you can see this is very easy. This is practically just spinning freely, very freely. I was doing it with one finger. If you encounter a lot of resistance towards the beginning, do not force it. Just unwind it again, unscrew it, and try and get that alignment between the axle pin and the receiver so that they're straight. It was probably, if you're encountering resistance, they're a little bit off, and that can actually end up damaging the axle. And so that's called cross-threading, and that's something you don't want to do. So if you encounter resistance early, just back off and try again. And you want to make sure that they are nice and snug right at the end. You can see kind of everything is nice and flush here. So encountering resistance here is not a problem. So make sure that they're nice and snug. And that's pretty much a wheel. And one thing that you're going to want to make sure of is that you make sure that they are tight before every practice. And because it's no good to have to stop in the middle of a practice because your wheel is falling off. Been there, done that. And the last thing about wheels is that a lot of the metal spoke, or all of the metal spoked wheels actually do go on a specific side of the chair. And so for that, we're actually going to refer you out to another video that goes over that, because that has a little bit more specifics that we don't have time to get into right now. So I think with that, I'm going to hand it back to Krieger to go into tires.
I think the wheels rubbing, maybe.
Or
Almost.
No, rubbing, sorry.
It's a little bit like tires too, anyway, because you know the tire will rub.
Yep.
Grant, Daniel, yeah, that was good. I'm just so glad you didn't ask me to do the sideshow of taking my day chair wheel off and doing that pose, because I know I will go down and everyone will have a lot of fun. I'll try it by myself. How's that?
All right.
I'll have to practice it. Okay, so Daniel has done a good job there with the wheels. So let's just talk about, you know, say for instance you have your wheel on, and all right, everything is ready. You get in your chair and off you go, and ooh, now you realize there's a sound in your chair that you hear that goes ting 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 or whatever, right? So you know somewhere there is rubbing. Okay, so most likely it can be, can get it going, most likely it can be the number, let's see, photos, that one, yeah. Okay, so most likely here, this photo is just the illustration of how the wheel could be once you have it on. I loosened it a little bit with my tool on the left side. So now my wheel at the top is rubbing the fender, okay? So in this case, when it's rubbing, you cannot really go forward or backwards, especially because of the camber in the wheels. It even worsens the effect. So the first thing is you're gonna check with your tool if you tighten it down well, so your wheel will be in. There's not a lot of space there in that little fender line, right next to your hip or your middle of your body. There's a very little space for where the wheel runs inside a fender, so you want to be sure it runs clean. Okay, now you've tightened your wheel, and there's still, or it might have been fine, but there's still some kind of rubbing. What you can do then is you can look at different, now Daniel mentioned spacers, right? So you can look at different styles of spacers just to add a little bit of width to the, or not width, a space between the upper part of the wheel and the fender. So you're going to take your axle out, and then you're going to add a little spacer, maybe only a few millimeters, 2 or 3 millimeter spacer might make the difference. And you're going to add that between the axle of your racing chair and also the hub of the wheel. Secondly, well, lastly, if all those doesn't work for you, there might be a bigger problem. Okay, so it can either be the spokes that's damaged in your racing chair, or of a spoke wheel. Then you have to either respoke, add spokes, or they have to pull your wheel again in a straight line. If that is not it, the worst case scenario is toe in, toe out. Toe in, toe out is when the wheels run in those plugs in the center. You can adjust the toe in, toe out, or the alignment of the wheel with those plugs. If that is out, you just have to get someone to help you with that, or we're going to handle that in a later video. I think that's it. Daniel, over to you again.
Yep. So,
I think Krieger, there we go.
all right, so how do we get air into the tires? So you basically have 3 options here. You've got your typical manual bike pump, and so this can reach some pretty high pressures. However, it is also pretty difficult for a lot of athletes to use themselves. So what a lot of us end up using is a battery operated pump. And so this is around $20 to $30 for the pump itself, and then whatever kind of battery you want to get. And so it's very simple to use, just one-handed. So that's what most of us would end up using. And then if you're out on the road, we have CO2 canisters to just get us home. Once you've chosen a pump, you need to basically know what kind of valve the tube has. So there are basically 2 kinds of valves. There are Presta and Schrader valves. And so this has a cap on it. The Schrader has a cap on it. So I'm just going to remove that real quick. And so you can see that the Schrader is kind of a wider valve and is very plain on the top. And then the Presta kind of has this nut here that you can turn. And basically, most pumps are meant to, most pump chucks, so this is the chuck of the pump, most pumps are meant, or most chucks, I should say, are meant to go onto a Schrader. And so they basically go straight on, lock it, and pump away. And so something that I kind of just touched on there was locking it. So if I were to try and pump a tire up and with this unlocked, that would lose air because there's a little seal in here that tightens down when I lock it. The position of the lever in the locked position depends on what kind of pump you get. So you just kind of have to know that. But if I tried to use a Schrader chuck on a Presta valve, it is not going to fit. And so I need what is called a Presta adapter. And so this basically will screw/push onto the chuck here, and basically till there are no threads exposed, and then lock it, and I'm ready to pump. And at this point, once you lock it, the adapter basically becomes a part of the pump. And so you want to leave that lock and don't touch it, regardless of what you're doing, unless you want to remove the adapter. So a common misunderstanding is that you need to mess with the lock in order to put the adapter onto a valve, and that's not true. That just press that adapter onto the valve, and you're good to go. So as far as actually using it here, I've got my tire here. You can see that the nut on the top is all the way up. I'm gonna get my adapter in here and then basically pump up to whatever my desired pressure is. Once you're up there, you're basically gonna want to be actually holding the adapter on for the whole time, and that's because the pressure inside the tire would pop the adapter off if I wasn't pressing down right now. But once you're ready to take the adapter off, you want to make sure that you pull it up straight and fast. So that basically, the fast part, well, let me get into that later. So the last thing you're going to do is just tighten that nut back down, and that just prevents any air from leaking if you happen to touch the valve. And so why I mentioned you want to get a straight and clean pull off of the valve is because, number one, if you do it slow, you're going to lose a lot of air. And if you do it at an angle, not straight off, you can actually end up bending the valve a little bit, and then the tire is going to leak air as well. And so if you're having some difficulties pumping up a tire, some things that you can try and do is, first of all, just reset. Just take the adapter off of the valve and just kind of try again. Sometimes something just isn't quite right. The next thing you can do is to make sure that valve or that nut is unscrewed, and give the valve a little tap to just release a little bit of air. Sometimes that valve can get a little stuck, and so that just kind of makes sure that it's moving freely. The next thing, if that still doesn't work, is that the components inside of the adapter here, they may be a little bit worn or old and not sealing properly. So try a new adapter. And the last thing that you can do is just try a whole new pump, because sometimes the pumps just go. I think with that, I'm
We
going
have
to
a question for you, Daniel, in the chat. You want me to
Yeah.
ask? Okay. Mary Fraser asked, what is the name of the adapter?
So the adapter is, so this specific one is from Zip. And so it was, these wheels that I have are actually from Zip as well. And so this came with the wheels. However, pretty much anywhere that sells a racing wheelchair will have those. Or you can probably go to a bike store and ask them for something like that.
Okay, great. Mary, let us know if that answered your question in the chat. Perfect.
All right, Daniel, me again, right?
Yep.
Okay. Hey, I just have to compliment you on your camera crew. They are doing an amazing job.
You're doing awesome.
Yeah, it's not you that's so good, it's your camera. I mean, they are amazing. I want to hire them too for next time. Nah, Daniel.
If I can get up off the floor after this, he needs a younger camera crew.
Yeah, someone should video you, Kim, so we can see how you get off the floor. All right, so next is tires. So Daniel had a good, he showed a little bit about the tires and the inflation and all that of the tires. So let's just hop right into a slide here and look at okay, well, that's fine. We can go to tubulars. We can go to tubular tires. So mainly we use two kinds of tires. This is called a tubular. What Daniel had on his on those carbon solid wheels, the disc wheels, he has tubulars on those wheels. Now, the reason why it is called tubular, I'm not 100% sure, but it's basically the tube is inside the tire, right? So the tube is inside the tire, and then they sew it all together. So you can never ever take the tube out unless you undo the sewing. When I started racing long ago in South Africa, they were really expensive. So when I had a flat tire, and it were hard to get these tubulars. When I had a flat tire, sometimes I unraveled the sewing, and then I would fix my tube, and then use dental floss and sew it all back together again. It worked, but sometimes you use your needle and you poke another hole in that tube, and then you are furious once you're done with that job and you air up the tire. Anyway, but now luckily it's still expensive here, but a little bit more affordable. So a tubular tire, they are the tire when it comes to racing. They are super fast. The rolling resistance on these tubular tires are minimal compared to the other tires that I will present to you in a second here. So if you use a tire like this, they are average between 19 millimeter and about 25 millimeter wide, 23, 25 millimeter wide. So they are pretty narrow, but they can take a lot of air. So if you maximize your air compressor into a tire like this, it will go up to say 180 or some of them 200 psi. So they can take a lot of air, but it is the tire of choice. Let's skip to more normal tires that I grew up with first, before I started racing, serious. Um, this is what when you go into a bicycle shop, this is what you will see at a bicycle shop: the tire and the tube. It's called a clincher. Now, a clincher is ideal for beginning chairs. They are cheaper. They roll pretty well. They take a good bit of air, not as much as the tubulars. I would say a good, 75 to 110 psi is good for a tubular tire. I mean, for the clincher tire. Um, they definitely do not have the performance that a tubular would have. But, it's better than being on a flat tire, or, than nothing. So, and it's quite a bit cheaper. The other thing about these tires are they hold their air almost forever. You can air up a clincher, and that the tube in there is definitely thicker, and it holds air better than the tubular. Okay, then we're gonna just go a little bit on fixing, or if you have issues with tires, or change a tire. On the left side, I have my tools for changing a tire on a tubular wheel, like the disc wheel that Daniel showed. And on the right side are those two little levers. That is what I would use for a clincher wheel and tire. So it's a bit of a messy job on the tubular. You really need to use an epoxy or some kind of glue or cement to get the tire on. So you would use gloves, and that can there actually has its own little brush in, but you can use your own brush as well, and you basically add the contact cement on both, on the wheel and also on the inside of the tire, and then you basically force it onto it's quite a technique actually. It's not an easy job to get a tire onto the wheel. It's sometimes really tight, but you do it with your hands. I feel like I have never really found a tool that can do it well, because it's you can damage the wheels really easy when you use a metal tool or any other kind of, even those plastic tools can mess the wheel up. then the cleanser, of course, just those tire levers, and that's about it. But you can use for and it's a bit easy, and I think most people know how to do that. And then at the back there's your tire, your air compressor again. Okay, yeah, that's about it for tires.
Krieger?
Yo.
Could you share, and Daniel, where you guys purchase your tires and or tubes for track?
Okay. Right. So I if you Amazon is great, you know. Even those little that little adapter that Daniel showed, it's in an L shape. If you just go on Amazon and say L shape valve stem or adapter, one of those will come up. They're not cheap, but you know you just need those. But I would say bike tires, biketiresdirect.com. They are the guys that have the biggest selection of all kinds of tires. Biketiresdirect.com. If not, it will be direct from Top End or direct from sportaid.com in Atlanta. But yeah, I would say those are your options.
Yeah, I'd say pretty much the same. Bike Tires Direct, or I think maybe Sport Aid also. I think kind of has a good selection. So yeah, I actually remember the first time. I believe it was the first time that I met you, Krieger, at a race. It's the Falmouth Road race, and I remember meeting you. And somehow we got onto tires and changing tires, and you had mentioned, yeah, you could change a tire in like 45 seconds in your chair. That just blew my mind as a young racer. I'm like, wait, hold on, what did you just say? And I remember you changed it in the stairwell of the hotel. Yep, in about under a minute. So that was rather impressive.
Yeah, well, thank you. That little video is Craig. Remember Craig Blanchett? He did the video and it's on YouTube. So if anyone want to go see it, it's just go Krieger's Cardboard Tire Chains. I guess if I was good for one thing, that was it, right? So
I can put it in the chat later. Yeah, I'll put it in the chat later. Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead and share.
All right, so going into hand rings, push rings, or hand rims, whatever you would like to call them, it doesn't really matter. But basically, it is where your hands will push. And so it starts as just a metal ring that eventually will get coated in some kind of rubber, whether that's a rubber tubing or a cut-up tire that you glued on, and then it'll all get bolted onto a wheel. And so there are a couple of common problems that'll come up. The first one, the picture on the left here, is basically when the glue starts to fail and the push surface starts to peel away from the hand ring. And that basically, it's supposed to look like kind of the corner or the left side of the very left edge of the picture. And that is what the back side is supposed to look like. And so this is a picture that's taken from the back. And so that's what it's supposed to look like. But when it starts peeling away like this, you can take a little bit of super glue and hopefully be able to reattach that little bit of hand ring that's kind of peeling off there. You want to get on these things pretty quickly because it's really the problems will only get bigger. And so eventually super glue won't be able to fix your problems. And so that's no fun. And on the right, we've got a picture of basically a worn hand ring. You can see this section of white stuff here is actually the backing of the tire that I used on the hand ring. And so talking about replacing a hand ring, basically you want to replace a hand ring whenever either the backing kind of the back kind of starts to peel away from its the hand ring, or if you wear through a large section of it. because basically that will cause you to start to slip and things like that if you have too much kind of just bad pushing surface. However, you should not replace it if you are too close to a competition. So, for me, I usually replace them at least a couple of weeks before a competition, and really for two reasons. Number one is the glue that I use, and the glue that most people use to replace a hand ring takes around 48 hours to fully dry, and if you try and use them before the glue is dry, you can actually end up just kind of tearing the pushing stuff or the pushing rubber right off, and then you have to start all over again, which is no fun. Speaking from experience here. And the other reason why you don't want to replace it too close to a competition is that the first little top kind of coating of the hand ring is usually kind of a little like almost oily, and it usually takes a little bit of pushing to get through that to a nice kind of pushing surface. Otherwise, that oily stuff is kind of slippery, so you won't get good grip. And so again, here is a link to a video that you can learn about replacing the hand ring coating. And so to kind of wrap up hand rings, we've got, you want to basically tighten the connections between the hand rings and the wheels. Every once in a while, they do just loosen up over time. And most of the times, people just use whatever hand ring is on their wheel. However, if you're ordering new ones, what the University of Illinois has found is if you want to measure basically from the first knuckle down to the end of your elbow, and that will give you an approximate size of the diameter the hand ring that you want. And the one exception to that is basically athletes with a high level of impairment, so hand impairment as well. They kind of talking like the 51 category. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you will eventually learn. But basically a high level of impairment, they actually will use sometimes a smaller ring that's actually a bit thicker, so to say, so that they can actually stay in contact with the ring all the way around the stroke. So their hand really never leaves the push ring at all. And if you did happen to order new hand rings and they come and they've got this tape stuff wrapped around them, that is coiled up tape, and that is not supposed to stay on. So you want to basically remove that before you start to use the hand ring. And I think in the rain, we use something called clister. And so that is basically just a sticky thing that we will put on our gloves to just help us get a little bit more friction on that hand ring. Some tips is just apply it early while the hand ring and glove is still dry, and apply it sparingly. You don't want to use too much of it. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with a giant sticky mess, and you might not get your hand off of that hand ring. The clisters are somewhat temperature dependent, so if you try and use them in the wrong weather condition, it could basically turn into oil itself, or basically just brick up and not be sticky at all. And really, you just need to practice with it and just figure out what sort of a system works for you. So I think with that, it's back to you, Krieger, with the other part of the pushing system, gloves.
Yep. Okay, let me just I don't know if you can see here. That is, but yeah, what wildwood, oh, it's maybe back to front, I'm not sure. But anyway, wildwood contact cement is great for hand rings if you want to bond your hand rings. Daniel, are you also do you also use wildwood, or what do you use?
Yep.
Wildwood, yes. Home Depot, Home Depot, and
Yep. Yep.
easy to find. Okay, so yeah, last thing on our list for this evening is the gloves. So and a little bit about why we use gloves, and what we should not do. This one here. No, wait, that one. Okay. Okay. All right. So there's a real good reason for us why we use gloves, right? When you get in your racing chair, or even in an everyday chair, when you really go fast in a day chair, you cannot see there. I'm grabbing the hand ring. That's in a day chair. Okay. So when you go fast, you at some point you're not going to be able to grab it anymore. So then you'll have to switch from grabbing just to kind of, let's see, kind of just connect it and drive it forward by just friction. Okay. So there, I contact my thumb is my guide basically. Also, this is in a day chair, but the same principle will be in a racing chair. So your thumb will guide your hand into the right position, and the upper part of your fingers will contact the rim and drive it forward. Okay, so if you think of a car, of an engine or a bicycle, your body and your arms or your body for a cyclist, his legs do the work, but that final contact is between the foot and the pedal. And that's so important, and over time cyclists went from a loose pedal, just a regular shoe, to those clip-in shoes or clipless shoes, whatever they call them. I'm not exactly sure, but so your foot is always in contact with with the pedals for maximum efficiency. Now for us, we cannot be always in contact with a hand ring, because that hand ring is moving so quick. And you're not allowed to do that anyway. It will be extremely dangerous if your hands are connected to your hand rims in a fixed position. So that's why we use gloves. So when I started racing, I at first I used my mom's garden gloves, So, and those were let's see, those were extremely primitive. We can just go to the harness gloves, to the harness. Harness. There you go. Okay, so just leave it here for now. So those were really primitive, but they did the job. What I did was just used like hockey tape, and I will add the thin places with hockey tape and make it really thick. So thick that it's almost, you cannot cut it with a knife or even with scissors. And that would be your contact area. And once you use that tape, it gets a little bit gooey, on the inside, and that forms a little bit of a natural grip to the hand ring. Then later on, people got smart and they started making specific gloves for wheelchair racing. Now here's a glove that's been, I think most of us have tried harness gloves, especially the guys from the earlier in the late 90s, I guess 80s already. I first started using these when I moved to the US. Great glove, very comfortable, and very forgiving. So on the right side, you'll see that big padded area. That is your whole pushing area. You can contact the hand rim with that big platform, and it's soft. And underneath, that is rubber, and underneath is foam. And so if you push at say 15 to 20 miles an hour, and you're not exactly right on the hand ring, if you miss a little bit, you can still manage to get away with a good push because that surface is so big. And over time, people thought, can you go to the, and a set of those gloves are about $220 to $230. They are sized, for different, hand sizes, medium, large, and small, and extra large or whatever. But excellent way to start your racing career. Then over time, we start making hard gloves. Now, hard gloves, the great thing about hard gloves, there's no you don't lose any energy between the glove and the hand ring. All the power and the pounding you put into the hand rim goes direct into it without any softness or any loss of energy. So it is definitely was a game changer for a lot of us. So the one on the left, you can see there, it's very similar to it's a big flat area to the harness glove. So you've got a pretty large area that you can contact the hand ring with. On the right side, you can see on the far right of my hand, right by the thumb and the index finger, middle finger, that's where your pushing the contact area would be. Great glove. I used these for quite a while. Before those, I made my own, but now they are, you have the option of 3D printed gloves. Great because it's a lot of work to make those gloves. Then lastly is the groove gloves. The previous one, they just call it paddles or flat gloves. Here, this is the groove glove. The amazing thing about these gloves are that they've got a couple of good things about it's. First, let me just say, it's not easy to get used to these gloves. You have to use your time and get into it's almost like an off-season time when you're on the roller and on the trainer, and you just go easy and your practice that's how I did it. I moved from one to the other during the winter, and then over time, your hand finds its path, which is a little bit more precise. You can see on the left glove there, on the top, there's that very narrow margin on top of my fingers. That is what has to connect to the hand ring every time on the same spot. Now, the good thing about these, you have a thumb on the right side. You'll see on the far right, that is the thumb area where it guides into the hand ring. You can see the path of the hand ring there. How it already made a line there. So that's a good example of how precise you have to be with these rings. But they have a phenomenal thrust. You see how high that area is above my middle and index finger? You can reach the bottom of the ring, and which is ideal. You want to grab the bottom of the ring, and you can have a lot of pressure and finish your push with a thrust and just a lot of power. And with that, it just helps your elbow to pop right up in the air again and go forward for that forward motion. But like Daniel said, this is rubber on rubber. All these gloves have a rubber surface and on a rubber hand ring. So we have issues with humidity and rain. That's where the clister is coming in. You can find those at Sport Aid or Revolution Sports. I also on Amazon is Spider Tack. Spider Tack is what the strongmen use. They use it to pick up boulders of 1,000 pounds or whatever, and hold it. So we have options to overcome that. Oh, Daniel, man, that was amazing. What I've finished on my end. I'm hand it back to the man here.
I'm going to pop in here. And just there were a couple of questions that came through the chat. Can you hear me well enough? Okay. So question, I think this one maybe Daniel can take. What about using clister during a road race?
Yeah, so it's perfectly fine. People do it all the time, and some tips that you can actually do. You can use are basically you can actually apply it to the frame of the chair, and actually don't apply it directly to the frame. That will make a mess. Put a layer or so of tape down on the frame, and then put the clister on the tape. And so that way you can keep a little bit of extra in reserve in case the rain gets worse, or you continue to slip. But then at the end of the race, don't forget it's there and just leave it there, because by the time you remember it, it will make everything just a mess. So there are little few tips there.
Okay, thank you, Kriega. There was a question about tubeless tires for wheelchair racing. What's the state of that?
Tubeless tires for wheelchair racing?
Tubeless.
Tubeless. Yes. Absolutely. We all know that it is definitely in the pipeline. There's been a few athletes in the world that's been using it with great success, I have to admit. It is the thing in cycling now. If you go to a cycle shop or the pro bike cyclists, they use tubeless. So yeah, I definitely think it's not going to be long where we might see some changes in our world as well towards tubeless.
Excellent. If there are any other questions, you can put them in the chat, but I think, yeah, we'll wait for a few seconds. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I had questions about, anything you guys, Daniel's like, no more questions. All right. Let's see here. I think, Carolyn, have you have anything else on your end?
I don't. I think we will have the same, we'll meet again next Thursday at the same time for our second session. So there is more information. And I will be sending out this recording for anyone that jumped on late or had to leave early or anything like that. I can't think of any additional questions on my end. I did put a resource for the 3D printed gloves. Daniel and Krieger, you may have others on there, but it's the Ingenuum 3D printing company from University of Illinois. That's the one that we use at Blaze. They've been hard to find in the past. Let's see. So someone asked in the chat, which you guys will probably get to this tomorrow. I'm assuming is alignment of chair. Will you guys talk about that tomorrow? Oh, sorry, next week.
Woo. So next week, we will talk about Daniel and Krieger will talk about, I'm not going to talk about the use of steering and the compensator and all of that kind of stuff. So I see the question was, it pulls really hard to the left. So that kind of question may be addressed in next we's session. Actually, aligning the wheels is really complicated, and we can send you to a resource for that. That's a kind of a separate issue. How much clister would you put on the tape on the frame, just in case?
Yeah, that sort of depends on what kind of clister I'm using. But honestly, as long as it's kind of in the reserve spot, as much as you want. I mean, I'll typically put probably a 3-4 inch section of tape and pretty much have it kind of coated in clister. But yeah, I've also I think were you there, Krieger, in was it Boston 18?
Yeah, we were together.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, there we had the issue that the clister, it iced. I couldn't use mine, so it was so cold. But yeah, I usually use, if you think of a toothbrush, as much toothpaste, you can fit on a toothbrush. That's a lot already. So you go very sparingly with it. It's better to add than try to take away, because you cannot really take away.
Yep.
All right. I saw a couple of other questions on seating position. I think we might try to get to those next week with a little bit. We can send those out to the guys, and they can think about how to talk about those. So yeah, next week will be that compensator, which is like the #1 troublemaker, right, on the racing chair. So
All for Daniel.
This is why Krieger's on this.
No, you're the photographer. Yeah, I mean, we need you on Daniel there.
Excellent. Carol, I think we'll turn it back.